I'm going to make a pumpkin risotto today, and I'm going to use this pumpkin shell as a kind of bowl to put it in. We're going to make a risotto using burnt butter and sage, basically. First thing I want to do is cut a hole in the top, and carefully, without cutting yourself, make a lid. And then you don't have to make a very big hole, and you actually don't have to take out all the pumpkin flesh, because we only really need about 1.5 cups. We'll be able to use the rest of this pumpkin some other day for a roast or something. But for now, we're making a bowl. So just scoop out the seeds and about maybe 2 cups of flesh. Be careful, because I like sharp knives, and I tend to always cut myself. So what we have now is a nice hollowed out bowl. And now what I do is I basically separate the seeds from the good bits of pumpkin, and then I take all the mucky bits and put those to discard. The seeds I roast and mix them with a bit of salt. They're fantastic to munch on. The good bits of pumpkin I'm going to cook in a stock, which does 2 things. It gives me a nice flavorful stock, and also softens the pumpkin so that I can mash it and put it in the risotto. So I add some water, maybe 4 or 5 cups, and then put together a few things, whatever's lying around the house. If you got celery, I use some cabbage here, and a bit of parsley, a chili, some garlic, onions, and I'm putting a chicken stock cube in here to give it a little bit more intensity of flavor. I don't want it to be too chicken flavored, otherwise I would have made a strong chicken stock out of bones, but I want this to be mostly pumpkin and at least a touch of chicken. So a bit of salt, freshly ground pepper, just a pinch of sugar because the pumpkin is already sweet. And we'll adjust these spices if we have to later. And then stir it up, bring it to a boil, and then simmer it while you prepare everything else. I went out in the garden, picked some sage, and got some unsalted butter and some Parmesan cheese. Grabbed whatever white wine, or I use champagne here, and La Dolce Vita cannoli risotto rice. So the first thing we do is melt the butter and put the sage in. What we're going to do is make our brown butter and sage, which we add at the end of the recipe. So the idea here is you slowly heat the butter until the milk solids start to go a little bit brown. You don't want it to burn, just brown up a bit. As soon as it starts to do that, take it off the heat, and it'll finish off by itself. Set it aside until a bit later. So the stock's looking all right. Now I'll grate up some Parmesan cheese, which is adding a nice, not only the cheese, but a great salty flavor, so you don't need much salt. So set that aside. I don't know, as much. I don't measure anything when I make a lot of these recipes. I just go by feel. Grandma once said, put it in. So now what I'm doing, I'll strain the stock to separate the vegetables from the liquid. I'll put the liquid over by the stove. I'm going to use that for the risotto. See, it's a nice golden color. Get a dish and tip your vegetables into the dish and bring them over to the counter. What we want to do now is separate the big pumpkin pieces from all the rest and discard the rest. And we're going to mash the pumpkin and put that in about 2/3 of the way through the risotto. The great thing about this risotto is you can use it the next day to make rice balls coated in breadcrumbs. It's beautiful. Some mozzarella in the middle. Arancini. But for now I'm mashing the pumpkin, and I want to cut a little bit of onion in a very fine dice. So when I want to do that, I generally use chopsticks, because that keeps the knife from going all the way through, and then I can cut it in a square pattern. And then you can either cut the onion in half and do this, or I'm taking a risk here with my fingers, but just cut it carefully and you get almost a perfect dice. And you just go about 2/3 of the way down. You don't want a lot of onions. Save the other bit for something else. Now we'll put a little olive oil into the pan and then add the onions. And we're going to stir those over medium heat until they get translucent. By the way, this dish is one of those dishes you cannot walk away from. You can't go check your email and go in the other room. You have to stay there and keep an eye on it. What I'm doing now, moving into a higher heat, because I like to evaporate this liquid as quickly as possible. Half of it will absorb into the rice. The other half goes off into outer space. So now we got a better heat going. The onions are getting nice. Good. At this point, you add the rice. I'm just using a big cup, but you could use twice as much if you want. And if you want arancini the next day, make twice as much. And then coat the rice with oil a bit, and then I'm using champagne here. Just put some in. We're going to burn off the alcohol and just keep the flavor of the wine. Now you see on the left hand, I've got the golden stock that's going in, and I keep the rice just covered and keep stirring it, because you want it to absorb that liquid, and it will do that quickly. And also you want to prevent it from sticking to the bottom. That's why you have to keep stirring, and you can't leave it. So just stir it until it absorbs the liquid, then do the same thing, just so it covers a bit. Keep stirring it. It'll gradually, over 10 minutes, 15 minutes, start to get an al dente texture, which is what we want. Okay. Now taste it every now and then, and when you get a nice to the tooth kind of texture, that's the time we're going to be adding in the pumpkin. And there is moisture in the pumpkin, so as that cooks, it also cooks the rice a bit more. You probably at this point don't need to add any more liquid. Let's see what happens here. We just put it in and stir it in. Now I'm not using it all. Just once again, just using my intuition. I want to get a nice blend. I don't want it to be too pumpkin heavy. So it looks right. And then next thing to do is a little bit more salt. Taste it. And yeah, use your intuition. Remember, we're putting in the Parmesan cheese in a minute, and that'll bring more salt. Now heat up your brown butter a little bit, and then what we're going to do is turn the heat off of the rice, and then tip the brown butter and sage into the rice. Ooh, it's getting good. This is the good bit. And then grab your Parmesan and throw that in. Now it's all starting to melt, so keep a lid nearby and put a bit of pepper in. Why not? Stir it up, and then you put your lid on it and just let it rest for a while. This is where the magic happens, by the way, in this stage. Now what I'm doing here is the inside of this pumpkin is cold, so I've taken what's left of the stock, brought it to a boil, then just poured into the pumpkin to warm it up. You can either keep the stock for something or discard it. Basically now we have a warm pumpkin. And our rice is definitely ready now, so we just spoon that into the bowl. Could put a bit of chiffonated parsley on top just to give it some color. You can serve it with a spoon in it like that, or put the lid back on. I made some pesto, and that's the way I'm having it. Pumpkin risotto with burnt butter and sage and pesto on the side.